Day 90 in the Atlantic hurricane season, day 108 in the Eastern Pacific, and that's where we have a new storm active right now, Tropical Storm Juliette, which has formed just off the Mexican coastline. It's expected to strike the Baja California Peninsula as a tropical storm in the next 24 hours or so, before moving out to sea and degenerating into a remnant low. We also have Tropical Storm Kong-rey in the Western Pacific, Philippine named Nando, near the Taiwanese islands, and Japan as well, of course, and it's expected to move towards the north and then towards the northeast. We also have 3 invests active in the Pacific at the moment, 92W in the northern section of the South China Sea, 93W and 94W both out at sea in the Western Pacific, none of which are likely to form at least yet, but that may change as time goes on. Looking at the Atlantic, all's looking quiet at this time. Of course, we had Fernand a few days ago, but no systems likely to form at this time. You can see a few areas that may prove to be interesting over the next few days, and indeed the models, or at least some of the models, are predicting possibly a new storm forming out in the central Atlantic. We'll look into that one a little bit later. The Indian Ocean looking somewhat quiet at the moment as well. There is a little bit of activity around the equator line there in the central Indian Ocean, but nothing that's expected to develop into a tropical storm in the next 48 hours, at least in the Indian Ocean there. So let's take a look at the sea surface temperatures and the Eastern Pacific first of all, including the Central Pacific as well. Warm waters off the Mexican coastline, but you can see after Juliette moves over the Baja California Peninsula and then onto the western side of that, the sea surface temperatures really drop off a cliff, and that's how Evo ended up earlier on in this week. Last week it was over cold waters and degenerated very quickly. Here in the Atlantic you can see warm waters here in the western and central Gulf of Mexico, around 30 degrees there, a little pocket of 30 degree waters out in the open Atlantic as well, not too far to the southeast, southwest of Bermuda, and a few other areas as well, certainly very warm for tropical storms to develop there. And in the Western Pacific, the same too can be said here. Very warm waters towards the southern Mariana Islands, for instance, around 30 degrees. That's probably the hottest point of the Western Pacific. Around Japan as well, southern Japan and the Ryukyu Islands, around 30 degree waters here too, which will certainly keep Kong-rey going at least until it hits Japan. So let's take a look at this storm now then. Tropical Storm Kong-rey, currently with winds of 65 miles per hour, pressure around 982 millibars, position 23.7 degrees north, 122.6 degrees east at 11 PM UTC on August the 28th. Now the storm is expected to move towards the north, glancing the coast of Taiwan, the very northeastern tip of Taiwan, and then moving out towards the northeast, bypassing the Ryukyu Islands without much effect, and then making landfall in Kyushu Island in Japan. That's the southern main island, and then moving into Shikoku and possibly Honshu as a tropical storm eventually before turning extratropical. Typhoon warnings already in effect for parts of Taiwan and Yonaguni in Japan, and they may be extended as time goes on, maybe to include the Ayama and the Miyako Islands. Currently some gale advisories in effect for that area, and indeed we may see some more warnings for the Japanese mainland as time goes on. Maybe even in Korea as well, if the storm moves towards the north of forecast. And in Taiwan as well, we've got lots of heavy rain warnings currently in effect too, in anticipation of the storm and indeed its effects in terms of rainfall. Tropical Storm Juliette then currently with winds of 45 miles per hour, pressures 1002 millibars. This storm's just formed in the past few hours. Positions 21.5 degrees north, 108.6 degrees west. As of 11 PM UTC on August 28th, it was located just southeast of the Baja California Peninsula, expected to move over that peninsula and then out to sea towards the west, where it will quickly weaken and eventually turn into a remnant low as time goes on. So obviously with the cold waters that I pointed out not too long ago, that's fairly expected. Tropical storm warnings are in effect though from San Evaristo to Bahia Magdalena in Mexico. That's pretty much the whole of the southern tip of the Baja California Peninsula, Baja California Sur. So that's tropical storm warnings currently in effect. Tropical storm conditions likely or indeed occurring over that area. So let's take a look at the current shear map then. First of all, the Atlantic, you can see quite a band of strong shear around the central point of the Atlantic, extending towards the Greater Antilles and towards Africa as well, but a little band below that of lower shear conditions, so any waves that find themselves in that area may have a chance of developing. We'll see about that. In the Eastern Pacific, including the Central Pacific too, you can see here low shear amounts by the looks of things. Juliette's just off screen. It looks fairly moderate as a matter of fact, just off screen there, but Juliette will probably find a way to strengthen just a little bit before landfall possibly, and then eventually weaken. Over Hawaii, strong shear levels here as well. In the central Pacific, you can see lower shear towards the equator, and any storms that find themselves there aren't any forecast will not have too much difficulty in intensifying in terms of shear. Looking at Kong-rey, you can see how that is in an area of possibly moderate shear. Those yellow areas are around 20 knots or so, but you can see lower shear towards its north, so as it heads towards the north, conditions will improve in terms of shear for that storm, and indeed we could see it just a little bit more intensification, but that's looking increasingly unlikely at this time. Here's the Atlantic then. You can see the water vapor imagery now, some dry air hanging about the Lesser Antilles area, extending out to sea towards the east. You can see an area of moisture in the central Atlantic, which could be our next tropical wave as well, or indeed our next tropical disturbance. We'll certainly see how that one goes in the next day or two. No invests classified yet in the Atlantic. In the eastern Pacific, you can see lots of dry air around here. Juliette will have a lot of difficulty trying to penetrate that, and indeed the dry air will penetrate Juliette, vice versa really, and will probably weaken the storm over the next few days, especially when it enters that area. It looks fairly intense just off the coast of the Baja California Peninsula. And in the western Pacific, you can see here lots of moisture towards the central part of the Pacific, with a bit of dry air towards the south, not too far from the Mariana Islands, Guam, and the other one I've forgotten now, the Northern Mariana Islands as well. And of course you've got the storm Kong-rey just east of Taiwan, but you can see most of the rainfall is over Taiwan itself, so that's why we've got heavy rain warnings there at the moment, because the storm is indeed producing lots of intense rainfall over Taiwan, and indeed further beyond that, some parts of the coast of China may be experiencing some heavy rainfall too. So here's the graphic in the western Pacific, the past 24 hours or so, how Kong-rey's moved towards the north. 93W is the one in the centre of the image, and 94W is that lesser developed storm towards the east. So this is the flow-to imagery then, you can see, of Juliette at this time. You can see how it's had a bit of a flare-up in intensification in terms of heavy rainfall, and that's likely to move over the Baja California Peninsula, the very southern tip, over the next 12 to 24 hours. Indeed, a few of the clouds have already made their way there, but as it turns out, in the next 24-36 hours, it will increasingly fade away and eventually dissipate. So this is Kong-rey then moving towards the north. You could be fooled for thinking that this storm is actually over Taiwan, but it isn't. It's just offshore to the east, in between Taiwan and the southern Ryukyu Islands of Japan, and the storm is expected to move towards the north. That means a lot of that heavy rainfall, which is currently displaced towards the south and the west, will move over Taiwan and possibly China, of course, as I said earlier. The CMC model then predicts a hurricane to form in the Atlantic, not too far from the Lesser Antilles, but we've seen all this before a few times, so I'm a little bit sceptical as to whether that may happen, but we'll see how that goes. Also predicting a storm in the eastern Pacific as well. The ECMWF model predicts a bit of a system in the eastern Pacific too, with another system forming towards the end of that one. Not too much going on in the Atlantic though, according to the ECMWF model, apart from a system that grazes the northern Cape Verde Islands and then moves out to sea and dissipates, possibly as a tropical storm. We'll see about how that one pans out. The GFS model takes a new tropical storm towards the northwest in the eastern Pacific, and another system in the Atlantic, I believe, that just moves out over the Cape Verde Islands again, similar to the ECMWF model, and then curves it towards the northwest, possibly as a weak tropical storm. The NAVJAM model also predicts a little bit of activity in the eastern Pacific, but not too much in terms of tropical storm development. You see that bit at the start there, but I'm not sure what exactly it's referring to there, because Juliette's off to the northeast. I don't predict any storms to form to its southwest, if that makes any sense at all. The GFDL model has those two systems there. They're currently marked as low chances of development according to the National Hurricane Center, not tagged as invests in the eastern Pacific, and one's expected to move to the north there. HWI, I think, agrees with that. None of them becoming tropical depressions or storms, and indeed both of them show that Juliette won't last very long at all, and indeed don't predict it to become a tropical storm, because those are slightly out of date from before Juliette became a tropical storm. That's all I can come up with for that. So this is the intensity comparisons. This is also a few hours old, so maybe a little bit inaccurate. This is what the models thought of how the storm would go. Most of them didn't predict it to reach tropical storm status, just stay just shy of tropical storm status, but the model tracks speak for themselves there. You can see the green line there. I'm not sure exactly which one that is, but it moves it through the Baja California Peninsula, pretty much how it's going at the moment. The blue line there taking it just offshore, that's a GFDL, the green line, and the HWRF being the blue line. The shear comparisons, shear's slowly decreasing, gradually decreasing, around 15 knots at the moment, which is a moderate amount, dropping to about 10 That doesn't really matter much because sea surface temperatures are going to be dropping like a rock over the next few days. Currently at 30 degrees, but will very soon fall to below 26 degrees, which is certainly no real condition for tropical storms to sustain themselves. And relative humidity is currently high, but is expected to fall quite a bit to around 50%, which is marginally favourable at best over the next 5 days. So let's take a look at the Western Pacific models then. The CMC first of all takes Kong-rey through Japan, I believe the northern coast of Japan as a matter of fact, and then a new storm forming after that, 2 new storms I believe actually, forming near Taiwan, the first one, and then another one actually near the Philippines, and another one towards the southeast of the Mariana Islands. Confused I am. The GFS model also takes Kong-rey through Japan, so it's pretty much a given, that one, and the next storm forming after that I believe, somewhere, forming near Taiwan as well. So both the models are latched onto a bit of a system forming near Taiwan. I don't know if it'll be a tropical storm or maybe even more than that, but certainly one to watch over the next few days for development in that region. So overall predicted season scores then for August the 29th so far. Tropical Storm Debbie, or TS Debbie, I don't know if it means tropical storm or not, it may not, with a smile, 48 points. CES 15 Hurricanes in second with 48 as well. William in third with 47. And that's the top 3 at this time. You can submit your own storm totals at the website force13.com/interactive.html. That's the main page for the interactive section where you can predict the season, and of course the hurricane quiz, which is now online as well if you want to partake in that. So on this day then, on August the 29th, in 1969 Tropical Storm Francilia formed near Trinidad and Tobago. In 1972 Tropical Storm Carrie formed in the Atlantic. In 1974 Tropical Storm Carmen formed near Puerto Rico. In 75 Tropical Storm Katrina formed in the Eastern Pacific, that was pictured just before. In 1976 Tropical Storm Joanne formed in the Eastern Pacific as well. So a few systems forming on this day, quite a few as a matter of fact. In 1977, Tropical Storm Anita formed in the Gulf of Mexico. In 1978, Tropical Storm Deborah made landfall in Louisiana. There it is pictured making landfall there. A bit fuzzy, but what do you expect from 1970s technology? In 79, David made landfall in Dominica as a Category 4 storm, resulting in 56 fatalities and $150 million across the Lesser Antilles in damages. As it made its way through the Lesser Antilles, and then it went on to affect the Greater Antilles too. Frederick also formed on that day too, in 1979. In 1987, Tropical Storm Lydia formed in the Eastern Pacific. The next year, Tropical Storm Chris made landfall in Georgia, pictured there. In 1993, Tropical Storm Jova formed in the Eastern Pacific. In 1999, Tropical Storm Wendy formed in the Western Pacific. And in 2002, Tropical Storm Dolly formed in the Central Atlantic. There it is pictured. Didn't affect land throughout its fairly short lifespan. In 2004, Gaston made landfall in South Carolina as a Category 1 storm, resulting in 9 fatalities and $130 million in damages. There it is pictured. And no one can forget, of course, 2005, Katrina making landfall in Louisiana as a Category 3 storm, resulting in 1,822 fatalities and $108 billion in damages in total. There it is pictured as well. In 2007, Tropical Storm Gil formed near Mexico in the Eastern Pacific side. In 2009, Kevin formed in the Eastern Pacific, and the other one that I forgot to read out, or didn't have time to read out rather, which just escaped there. And you can track any storm that forms, including the ones that are currently active, at the website force13.com/stormtracking.html. That's the main page for the storm tracking information, where you're presented with the map which shows where the storms currently are, including invests, with tables at the top and bottom which show their intensities and any warnings that are currently in effect. So it's nice and easy to see at a glance all the storms and any warnings that are currently in effect. And you can go further in depth as well by basin to see where the storms are headed, and indeed any warning or track information that may be of more relevance and in more detail as well, which is fairly important at this time, with lots of warnings in effect at the moment on both sides of the Pacific. You want to check out the website in between these videos to keep up to date. You can also visit the social pages as well, YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Force 13 is on all 3 of those. Please search us. You should find us fairly easily enough on any of those mediums, and please do show support by doing the usual means of engagement, by liking, subscribing, commenting, favouriting, following, or indeed anything else that I may have forgotten, as I usually do at this point. But I very do much appreciate anything positive that comes out of your comments, or indeed anything constructive, because that can help as well. And it's also 88 days until Hurricane Week 2013. This is Force 13's big feature that we run every year. It's the second time we're doing this, and it's basically a collaboration and a compilation of the most fiercest storms out there possibly, but this year we're going by nation, how many with the storms that made landfall in each nation or in each area, each region of the world. So if you feel you have anything to contribute, please visit the website force13.com/hw2013.html. That's the main page for it, and there's many means of contacting me from there. You can also visit the discussion forum, which is online, force13.com/forum, where you can discuss current storms or indeed past storms or anything else hurricane related or cyclone related out there. But until then, until the next update, which will probably be at around midnight UTC on Friday morning, August the 30th, until then, that's all for now.